We're going to remove this chuck and we're going to replace it with a ER32 clamping collet chuck on there. Hopefully the size fits. This is a collet chuck that I've purchased on Amazon from a brand called HIP, and it's intended to fit on this little 7x12 mini lathe. This is specifically a Harbor Freight one that's been CNC'd, but there are many generic versions of this. So the collet chuck is an ER32 Collet Chuck, and I'm not crazy about the way it ships. And if you buy it from Amazon, it basically ships in this padded container, this padded envelope, and all it has around it is a simple, heavy-duty cardboard box. But I just feel like they could add a little bit more padding to it. I don't see any visible damage on this one, which is good. But I could see like how sometimes if they handle it roughly, if they drop it, it could ding the corner. I mean, the box is thick cardboard, but still, like if they just threw that down on the cement floor, it could ding an edge or something. But I didn't see any visible damage to this. It all looks good. It came with, attached to the packaging, spanner wrench for the nut that came with it. So now we're going to show how to install it on the lathe itself. This collet chuck for the lathe has I think it's an 80 millimeter outside diameter, and I believe 55 millimeter inside diameter. That's supposed to fit directly onto this lathe spindle here. And the nuts for this collet are ER32 nuts. So I went ahead and purchased just a whole set because I didn't have any yet. The collets that I use for the CNC milling machine are mostly either 16s or 20s or smaller because I don't use any tools above a ½ inch. This goes up to 3/4 inches, and I usually buy Techniques because they're a bit more expensive than the Chinese brands, but the quality is better, the runout's a lot lower, they have good tolerances, and they are comparable to the very high-end brands, but not quite as expensive, so the price is somewhere in between. It was about $200 for the set, and it's got the whole range that I would need. So we'll show later how these collets fit into the collet chuck. This is the standard chuck on this little mini lathe, and it's just a 3-jaw chuck with a key, and it's attached to the spindle with this backplate here. We're going to remove this chuck and we're going to replace it with a ER32 clamping collet chuck on there. Hopefully the size fits. First thing is to remove these nuts that are on the back plate. And here he's using the key to prevent the chuck from rotating while he's applying torque on the nuts. So it looks like the nuts are threaded into the screws are threaded into the chuck, right? And that's a through plate on the spindle. That's how it works.
Yeah. Is it
So we're going to have to find these holes are threaded here. So we're either going to have to find a screw that's smaller than those threads and passes all the way through, which is probably not as good of an idea as finding some. Well, we don't have access. There's no access back there, so we had to do the same thing. We probably have to use these. These will probably come out, right? Maybe they're set screws. We'll see when we take it off. That will make sense if they're set screws, and then have to put them inside of that collet chuck. Yeah, they are set screws, right? They have hex heads in there. Now we have to use a hex wrench to remove those set screws. So here's what the face looks like. It's a little bit dirty right now, so first thing to do is clean that off, make sure you get a good fit on it. Hopefully the fit is precise, otherwise there's going to be some run out. So here we need to take out these set screws out of the old chuck. It'd be nice actually to probably get another set of these set screws. So we'll take a measurement on what the thread is. Well, this is through holes, so we could run a bolt all the way through if we had one like that. What do you think? Is that
M6?
M6? May I take a measurement on it?
6 or 5?
A little bit big for 6. M6. Alright, so we're left with these set screws. What length are those set screws? 25 millimeters long, and they're M6s, normal thread. So now we're going to thread them into this collet chuck. So you're leaving enough out because it's a through thread, but you're leaving enough out that there's going to be some space on the spindle. I believe the spindle is one piece. This doesn't come out. It does have an internal taper, I believe, that you can use. You can use some collets on, but the collets end up being quite small. It does have an internal taper, I believe, that you can use. You can use some collets on, but the collets end up being quite small. Okay. It's got the 3 set screws in there, and just lining it up. Did you try it first just to see like how it fit and how it seems like there's
Fits pretty good.
not much play?
No.
Do you feel anything?
No at all. You want to try?
No. No, I don't feel anything. Not with the amount of force I'm applying to it.
This will be very interesting. This is the tricky part, is putting these nuts back on. Will they fit? Will this wrench head fit? You got it? You have to leave it out a little bit. Yeah, become easier.
So the trick is to leave it out a little bit, to leave more space, so that there's kind of more space to stick your fingers in there and thread it. Because even if you can get a wrench in there, you still have to rotate it enough to engage, and even with a wrench like this that has even with a ratcheting wrench, it's still tricky because if there's no resistance, and it's not going to ratchet when you're trying to engage it on there. So there you go. Once you get it on there, it's not too bad. I actually kind of like this collet chuck for to hold on to small things so you don't mess them up with the teeth. I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons for it, but I'm wondering if we'll end up using this more.
Right.
Now, what are you trying to do there right now?
This one, when I rotate the nut, he got a little bit inside.
Oh, the set screw went inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe next time it's better to run the set screw with
yeah.
Is that what you did?
No, I put in this side the way we were there.
So if we had he had a little bit of trouble when putting the nut on. It was actually driving the set screw in. So instead, if we put the set screw basically in from this side, and we could use the hex wrench here to hold the set screw while you drive the nut on. That would actually be even easier because you could actually just hold the nut here and then use the set screw to spin the screw into the nut, and then you could even potentially tighten it from there if you needed to.
Yeah.
So next time we'll do that. Yeah, you can just use the hex wrench to add pressure to the screw and keep it from spinning as you're turning the nut, as long as the nut doesn't have a lot of resistance on the screw. Did it still spin the screw back in?
No, but he's not coming out.
You got enough thread on there?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even know this collet chuck was an option for this lathe until the other day when you said we needed something for the CNC. And when I thought I knew of these collet chucks with a flat backplate, but I didn't know that there was one that fit this lathe. That's something we didn't pay attention to. Is you made, well, I didn't pay attention to, but you made sure those surfaces were clean.
I cleaned those
when before assembling it. So that's one thing that's important. Is you want the surface, you want that ID. To be clean in here and the inside, so it fits on there, and then you want this to be really clean right here too, on that surface, both on this and the faceplate. So you're not getting, because if you get any chips or anything in there, then it's gonna make it angled. So then the runout will be bad. So there's a nice variety of collets here, and I think each collet can do has a clamping range of about 1/32 of an inch. So you don't want to over clamp a collet. You don't want to squish a collet until it's, all the gaps are touching each other. You want the collet to be as close to your material as possible. So this is, presumably this was 5/8 material, because it's a perfect fit in that 5/8 collet. And you can see, made sure that the bar was clean. So there's, I guess you want to wipe the bar down so you don't get junk in between that and the collet either. And make sure the collets, since the collets are new, make sure they're clean too on the inside and the outside. So everything has to be, with these collets, like everything has to be clean. Like the inside of the collet chuck has to be clean and preferably lightly oiled. The inside of the nut has to be clean and lightly oiled, and the nuts are eccentric. Well, they have an eccentric hole in there. You see that eccentric hole here? That's what captures this edge here and makes it such that when you clamp this nut in there, and it tightens down, it's when you go to unscrew it, it doesn't just pop off. The how do you say, the clamping force doesn't just, the collet doesn't just pop out of the angle, because the angle is pretty shallow. So the nut actually slips in there. Can you do it again? It actually slips in there into that eccentric circle, and then is captured, so that when you're unscrewing the collet, the first thing you'll feel is it'll get loose, and then you need to keep unscrewing, and then it will pull the collet out of the collet chuck taper, thereby releasing your material. So I've seen some people aren't familiar with these ER collets. They try to put the collet in the chuck first and then put the nut over top of it. Well, that doesn't work, because it won't line up, it won't make it through that eccentric hole, and you could actually run the risk of damaging either your collet or your nut. So that's not something you want to do there. Here it is in the titanium was inserted into the titanium rod was inserted into the right collet, and then put the collet into the chuck. Now we can just loosen up the collet and remove the material, and swap out the material, or extend it or shorten it. And he's going to use the collet wrench, go ahead, to tighten up the collet. Okay. And before you tighten up too much, show a quick example of when you loosen it, what happens when you loosen it. So he's going to loosen it, and it's going to feel loose, but it's not going to be, but the material is still stuck in there, because the collet is still, you see how the collet's not moving, only the nut's moving. And then you get to this point and it gets tight again, and so you have to use the wrench again there. Now the collet is loose, and now you can move the material. Did you have set a specific length, or does it matter?
No.
Okay. We want to do a test to see how concentric it is, maybe. So tighten it up, and we'll do a quick test with the dial indicator to see like what the concentricity is. All right, so we have our dial indicator set up here. This is a very sensitive dial indicator. The material is not, this is just raw stock material. It's not like ground or anything, so the material could be, has some surface roughness, could be out around a little bit too. What we should have done really is should have done both. We can do it later, but we should have done one, put it in the 3-jaw chuck and see like what the concentricity is, and then compare it to this this ER32 Collet Chuck. The theory is that the Collet Chuck should be better, and so that's one reason for using a Collet Chuck, is that it should have better concentricity, and the other reason, which is a major reason, is to do less damage to the material. The 3-jaw chuck, it has these teeth that are relatively sharp, and they only contact at small points, so you have to tighten in order to hold the material really well and not allow the material to slip. You have to tighten up those jaws until they oftentimes dig into the material, the damage of the material. Unless the material is like a fairly hard steel, especially if it's aluminum, you're gonna make marks on the material. So with the Collet Chuck, the collet surrounds the material much more and captures it, and there's just a tiny little space. So as long as you don't like tighten it to the extreme, just tighten it a good amount, then it should do very little damage to the actual material. So you're not going to make marks or dig into it. It'll also should probably grab the material a little bit better, such that it's not going to have less tendency to slip. Okay, so do a quick test with the dial indicator to see.
It's not touching.
It's right above it. It's not touching it. What we should do is put a piece of piece of ground stock in there and see with some ground stock. Do we have something like that? Maybe like a pin or something that we can put inside to see. I'm just curious. I just want to see like how. I mean, even with this, these graduations on here this is 0.002 millimeters. That means that when right now it's a 0, it went to millimeters. There, it went up to 0.040. That's a pretty small amount, right? I mean, considering that the materials.
Yep.
Considering that the material is not ground or anything. This doesn't have any cross-drilled holes or a good way to grab on to this part in order to loosen the nut. So right now I was having trouble like grabbing on. He tightened it up so much that it was difficult to loosen it up. So go ahead and try to loosen it up. Like how would you? I mean, you could jam something in the back here with these nuts, but that's not a great.
It's not
ideal. You're gonna mangle those nuts over time.
We can try that.
Oh, you can use like the strap wrench.
Yeah.
Strap wrench, as long as it doesn't get too oily. That strap wrench is not great, but maybe get a better quality strap wrench for doing stuff like this.
Or can make holes on that part.
You think so? I mean, it's hardened, right? So you have to. No, that works well. The strap wrench method works well to break it free. And also be careful. You also have to be careful not to ding your bed with the tool when you're trying to do that. So here it's free now. I believe that before you can remove the collet from the nut, you need to remove the material, right? Because the collet won't come out because the material is keeping it from moving. So let's handle that. This technique set comes with this nice but simple wooden block, good for storing the pellets in drawers, which is a good place because then it'll keep the chips and dust off of them. You can also put some rust preventative stuff in the drawers so it keeps them from rusting too. So we're taking an old mill bit and putting it in here. So the mill bit should be have very accurate surfaces with ground shaft essentially. It's going to tighten it up, and we'll check it again with the dial indicator to see what it is with a ground surface like that. 0.014 millimeters. That's very small.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really good. So now later we'll do a comparison to using the same tool in the 3-jaw chuck and compare to see like what that runout is on there.